Believe it or not, but OWCS is already ramping back up again. Literally within the next week or so, we're diving straight back into the action, and it's probably the shortest offseason in Overwatch esports that we've seen in ages. I mean, we have to go pre-Overwatch League for this kind of short wait. And unlike last year, where things were a lot more uncertain, they were kind of figuring things out as it was going, we have more of a solidified format this year, and we kind of know which teams are going to be a part of Stage 1 already. So that allows for me to do something that I haven't done in like over a year, and that's make a true dedicated Overwatch esports off-season recap. If I'm being honest with y'all, it's been a bit since I felt the spark to make a video, but seeing all these teams qualify, having the solidified information in my face, and missing these off-season recaps has allowed me to get the motivation to go out there and make one of these for you. So today, we're going to highlight the teams that we know of as of this recording that are participating in North America, Europe, and Korea. And we'll talk about some of the big formatting changes that I have not discussed on this channel yet, just to give you an opinion, and just in case you've been living under a rock. I know the rosters are kind of the more exciting part, so that's where we're going to begin, and let's look at Korea first, seeing as it is the most relevant region. So Korea, which actually starts on January 24th, they have 9 teams participating, and of those teams, you're going to see a lot of familiar faces. So the big 3 of last year, Falcons, Crazy Raccoon, and Zeta Division, they've all returned, and they're actually going to be sponsored partner teams in OWCS this year. Very well deserved. And all of these teams are basically sticking to what they had. They're running it back for the most part with a couple of minor changes here and there. Crazy Raccoon, they've got the same roster, no changes to be spoken of right now. Can't blame them for that. They came up short last year, but obviously this roster is absurd. And they're basically one different meta away from potentially winning the finals last year. They were so great for the most part, and this year we could see some redemption, and they might just finish off the job. With Team Falcons, on the other hand, they're for the most part running it back, but Smurf did retire from Overwatch esports, which is super unfortunate, but it is what it is. And also Krusty is leaving Falcons, and he will be coaching Gen G, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And what's especially weird is they don't even have Junk Buck either. He left for a different endeavor as well, so Falcons are left with a bit of a hole at their head coaching position. Not to mention that Hanbin is going to be solo tanking, at least for the time being. Hanbin is a beast. We have no doubts about his abilities, but obviously he can't cover everything, and I'm curious to see how that will go depending on what the meta is. There could be some situations where it's rough for Falcons. Hasn't Hanbin suffered enough with having to play Monkey and things of the such? I just don't know, man. I'm worried that this could end up biting them depending on what we see be played in the future. But for now, this is what Falcons is rolling with. And, you know, there were some rumblings that Crazy Raccoon and Falcons would do a little bit of a support swap. I think it was Shu for Fielder, not necessarily a trade, but the two guys just switching teams. I guess that fell through, or that rumor was never real to begin with. So they're just going to stick to what they have, and seeing how great they were, it makes a lot of sense. They will be 2 of the powerhouses and favorites of Korea for sure, but not far behind is Zeta Division. They're always really close, very competitive against those guys last year, and for the most part, they're also running it back. Like with Falcons, I'll be curious to see how Bernard can handle a solo tanking life, at least for the time being. Changes can happen. I'm sure they will if they become desperate enough, but for now, they're rocking with just Bernard, and I'm excited to see him play more because he was a beast in his first season of OWCS. Zeta Division are still an absolutely sick roster, and if they lock in enough, maybe this time around, they can be in the top 2 of Korea. But interestingly enough, aside from those 3 being the favorites, there's also one other partner team in Korea. I heard there would only be 3. It'd be like an even split between NA, EU, and Korea, but I guess that fell through. Korea gets 4, as they rightfully deserve, and T1 makes their way back into the scene. Yet another OG org that's back into the mix. They left, I think it was in 2022, but they're back, and the roster they're fielding, I'm a pretty big fan of. I mean, I don't know if they'll punch up to top 3, let's say, but they clearly have the potential. Proud Viper Zest, Donghak Opener Skewed. That's a pretty good team. They remind me a lot of what Yeti was in the early portion of OWCS Korea last year. This dark horse team that has a lot of potential to really make you sweat. Maybe they take a game off of a big team at times. They give off that energy. There's a lot of players on here that are underappreciated, that are super good, and I think them all being on the same team could do them some good results. I mean, just going down the list, Proud, he was excellent on Poker Face last year, and some people think that he went underappreciated in a lot of moments as Widowmaker was insane, and now he's on a team that is better than any of the other ones he's ever played on, arguably. And you're pairing him up with the likes of Viper and Zest, two flex DPS that have proven they can be elite players. What Viper did on Yeti last year, I mean, it goes without saying. It was absolutely insane. Some of those Tracer performances, putting him on a team that can unlock his real potential, that could be a scary thought. And somebody like Zest, he still can be reliable. He maybe provides a bit more versatility in some aspects compared to Viper. I think it's a good trio that offers you a lot. Pretty good upside, but also a decent floor. And also, notably, you brought in Skewed. This guy did not play in OWCS last year. He took a break. We haven't seen him play since the Soul Infernal days, so I'm pretty pumped to see him get back into the fray. He's still very capable of being one of the best flex supports in the world for sure. So I'd like to see if he still has it after taking a year off. I like that he's paired up with Opener, underappreciated player. Dong Hack is running it back again. I like this team a lot, and it's one I'm going to cheer pretty hard for, I think. Those, I'd say, are the four most notable franchises, if you want to call it that, the four most notable teams with the most powerful rosters that are going to be seen as the favorites that'll compete against each other a lot. So now we're going to run through some of these other teams. You'll see some familiar faces and some familiar team names as well. How about Poker Face getting back into the action again? This time they're running it back with a brand new roster. Dart has moved on from the likes of Vec. He's joined Poker Face. Donghung is on this team. There's some interesting prospects. I don't know how much I'd fear this team, but it seems like a pretty cool team. I'm also looking at Team Way, W-A-Y. Don't know how you're going to say that name, but they've got Who Are You on there. The Genji GOAT is back. After playing, I think it was in Pacific last year, he's made his way back up into the big leagues on a Korea team, and there's a lot of familiar faces on here. The GOAT, Mealguru, Peppy, he's gotten a lot of action. Lee Soo-min in Amaka, backline, Aid. All these guys have a lot of experience, and I'll be curious to see if they can piece it all together. And notably, From the Gamer, aka FTG, they're back with a brand new team after saying goodbye to the guys that went to Zeta. And you got Prophet on here. Sun Jun, he sung as well. He played some very good games for the likes of Zeta Division before, so it's good to see him getting another chance. He's the solo tank on this team, and then they wrap it up with Vindame and Vigilante. I like this team as well. I'm a pretty big Heesung fan after what he showed me last year, and I think Prophet could still have some juice left, and Sun Jun I think is a pretty underappreciated Korean flex DPS as well. I'm not expecting this team to be a world beater, but they've got some favorites that I think are pretty easy to cheer for. Also, you'll notice that once again, Vec is back. Somehow, some way, this team continues to find ways to make it to the main event in Korea. I don't know how they do it, man. They're like a cockroach. You just can't kill them. It goes to show this organization is pretty solid and they know what they're doing. There isn't that much to talk about in this team, but there is one critical name that stands out, and that's Architect. The Flex DPS legend who retired 2 years ago, the San Francisco Shock champion, the man who made the Bastion Chandelier play, that Architect, he's getting back into the fray, and I'm curious to see what kind of juice he has left. We're seeing a lot of retired pros suddenly come back. We'll talk a bit more about that later with some other teams, but I'm kind of curious to see what he can do. He's going to get some minutes for this team. And at the end of the day, even if he plays terribly, he's still one of my all-time favorite players, so I'm pretty pumped to watch him play. Then there's the team with the most mystery and probably the lowest expectations, and that's going to be a new era. There's a couple of notable guys. MCD's on here. He played pretty well on Twisted Minds, so maybe he's kind of resurrecting his career a little bit. And then Ruler as well. I've seen him make some plays for some teams in the past, but other than that, this team feels like a total mystery to me, and I'm curious to see what they have. And just before escaping like the whole Asia scene, just a couple of quick things to note with Pacific, for example. Miku Fan Club, the GOAT, they're returning. Frogger and Color Hex are on the same team, so that's a pretty interesting pair. And in Japan, surprisingly, Edison and Kalios are on a team. I'd like to see how hard Edison can dominate after taking some time off. Should be pretty fun to watch. Now we're moving over to EMEA. In this region, as of right now, still has a bit to be decided, but I still wanted to get this video out anyway since so much has been going on. So in EU, there's going to be 3 partnered teams. Twisted Minds and Virtus Pro both made it, but then surprisingly, Gen G is the other partnered team. I'm kind of shocked to see them be in EU, but maybe they tried hard to get an Asia slot and they just couldn't, so they decided to go over here and get one instead. Either way, it's great to see them return. Gen G is a staple of Overwatch esports. Now, unfortunately, as of this video, there is no confirmed roster. We do know a rumor of what it could be, at least, with Krusty being the head coach, and then the team consisting of Top Dragon, Sauna, Mag, Crispy, and Canale. There's no confirmation on that, but that is the heavy rumor as of right now. And unfortunately, Virtus Pro is currently a mystery as well. Apparently, their leaked team does consist of a couple of players, including the likes of Shockwave, Knife, Vestola, and Gala. Don't really know what the rest of the team is looking like, but that's what some of the rumors look like for them. Take it with a grain of salt, of course, but that's what the thought is right now. As of this recording, the only partner team that has a confirmed roster is Twisted Minds, and much to the dismay of London Spitfire and former SSG fans, the band has officially been broken up. They're going their separate ways. Hottie, Funny Astro, and Psycho are joining Twisted Minds alongside Quartz, Yubi, and Irony. I have pretty mixed feelings on this roster. Part of me feels underwhelmed, but at the same time, it's not a bad roster at all. I have questions about Hottie solo tanking. We've seen some mixed results last season and in other ones, so we'll have to see how that goes. You gotta play through him, whether you like it or not. You don't have a choice. But I do like the idea of a Quartz and Psycho DPS line. I think there's a lot of potential there. My dream was to see Kevster and Quartz together. That sounds like it would feed families, but Psycho's still a pretty good option as well. It's not a bad consolation prize. It was a bit of a turbulent start to Psycho's Tier 1 career, but the last few years he's really turned it around, especially last year on SSG where he showed he can compete with the best of the best. I think him and Quartz should complement each other quite nicely, and maybe I guess you throw Yubi in from time to time. Low-key though, I'm kind of vibing with the support line. Funny Astro's still a really good player depending on the hero, and Irony I think goes under the radar before he ended up getting kicked off of Yeti in favor of that whole Izayaki Lee Jae Gun disaster. He made some pretty good plays for Yeti back in the day, and I think he deserved, rightfully so, a second chance on a relevant team. And Twisted Minds, they have found success with these Korean imports at Flex Support, and I think Irony could fit the bill. I like the idea of him and Funny Astro together, and I think they should work quite well. But honestly, with the information we know and the rumors as well, I don't know how scared I am of the partner teams compared to the Ultimates, who arrived onto the scene and, at least in my opinion, had the best roster in EU by a pretty decent margin. They're rocking with Kai, Kevster, Chase, KSA, Faith, Twilight, and Skyrippa. That to me, from like a pure balance perspective, feels a lot better than these other rosters. They have the highest upside, and they're the ones that I consider to be the favorites to always be on top of this region. My one complaint is I'd like to see them have another DPS on the team, so it's not just Kai Kevster. There are certain situations where Kai isn't going to show up depending on the meta, but him and Kevster, they're close friends. Obviously, they're going to be on the same team together no matter what. And in most cases, they should be able to get the job done, especially because I think they have players at other positions that can pick up the slack and be relied on. That's what makes this team feel so strong in the European region. They have a good playmaker at every level. They have someone at each position that's going to make some good contributions. You've got Kev at DPS, you have KSA on tank, who's still an absolute beast, and how about Twilight, man? After retiring from Overwatch League after the final season with Boston Uprising, he has decided he wants to come back. The motivation has been resparked, and surprisingly, he's not playing in Korea, instead opting to be a Korean import in Europe. But hey, maybe he just needs a change of scenery, and all I'm saying is, if he can be anything close to what he was on Boston Uprising in his Overwatch League days, it's going to be pretty good for that team, and it's going to make them a threat compared to all these other teams. Twilight will bring a level of playmaking that pretty much no other flex support can bring if he plays at the level that we hope he can, that we know he can. Twilight's played on English-speaking rosters before, so has Faith. I think so long as the chemistry works out with them and the rest of the team, and they play consistently with each other, that it could be pretty good. I mean, on paper, this should be the best support line in all of Europe. I mean, for real. There aren't a lot of great backlines. It's a pretty big shortage. Most of the great support players, they're over in Korea. So to have Twilight and Faith is just such a big advantage. And you know, for a lot of these guys, They were on the ENS core last year, and they struggled big time with supports. It was a revolving door over there. A lot of guys, they just weren't cutting it. With Faith Twilight, if they play up to their potential, you don't have to worry about that anymore. That was the biggest problem with their team, and you could essentially get rid of it with 2 players of this caliber. Faith is really good. Twilight is one of the greatest of all time. This is a nice roster. There's also a couple of other interesting names, and maybe some of them will be fighting in the relegation territory, maybe not. One team actually still hasn't been confirmed from the other 4 that I haven't talked about. I'm sure they'll get their spot soon. But the others, we have Soccer Esports, Team Peps, and I don't even want to pronounce that name. I'm just going to say AQ. If I'm being honest, Sakura, they don't interest me all that much. There's a lot of returning names like China and Hitori that are underrated, but you can't expect them to punch up that high. It is good to see them, though. What I'm more interested in is Team Peps, especially, because Soon is coming back to Overwatch Esports. I never thought I'd see the day where this guy touches Overwatch again on the main stage. It is just so great to see him back. One of my favorite players of all time. After the whole Boston Uprising fiasco with visa issues, it was a really depressing end. He went to go play Valorant. I thought that was the end, but he is back. Now, just like with Architect, expectations are extraordinarily low for this guy. He made a couple of good plays. I watched the qualifiers here and there, but he's in his old man stages at this point. There's not much juice left. I'm just hoping to see him break out the signature Tracer and Widow from time to time, and we'll call it there. A lot of fans are going to be pumped to watch soon, especially the OG Overwatch esports fans. And I'm sure all of France is cheering as well. It's really exciting, and you're pairing him up with exoDIO. I don't know how much Soon's going to play because Ken's also a pretty decent player. But overall, there's some fun pieces to this team. Expectations are pretty low. I don't expect them to punch above their weight, but I'm glad to see Soon back at the very least for one more time, bare minimum. And finally, we have AQ. Again, I'm just calling them that for short, and they've got an interesting mix here. The likes of Checkmate and Landon definitely stand out. Wasn't expecting to see either of these two here, but Checkmate has shown he likes to play for the Saudi orgs. Landon has also played in Saudi E-League as well. I'm pretty sure they were teammates if I remembered in one of the leagues. Can't exactly remember, but they're both back at it. I'm surprised Landon's not playing in NA, but hey, just means another good flex support in the mix for a region that definitely needs more good support players. And I don't hate pairing him up with Haku. I think he was probably one of the okay options you could have chosen from, so I don't mind it. He had some good performances in Esports World Cup in 2023 for Saudi Arabia. And Checkmate, he has potential at least. Maybe there's still some juice left in the tank. And you've got Tread as well, who had some pretty respectable performances last year. Does this team really speak out to me? Not particularly, but I could definitely see them finishing like top 5. That's probably their upside, but who knows? There's still a lot to come. I don't know how this team's going to play together. I'm curious to find out. And finally, there's North America, which is the most empty at the moment, with 2 teams still having a to be determined, plus Team Liquid, who haven't officially announced their roster yet. They, out of nowhere, ended up being one of the 2 partner teams in NA. I'll be honest with you, I don't know how that could happen. On one hand, it's cool because I remember watching them when I first got into Overwatch esports, then they left, but it's kind of bizarre to me that you could give a spot to a team that has been out of Overwatch esports for almost 8 years, instead of giving it to Toronto Defiant, Nightmare, and/or NRG, teams that have been loyal to the scene. That is a very bizarre choice. But nonetheless, they're a partner team, they automatically qualify, and there are some rumblings about some of the players that could be on their team, but a lot of that stuff has kind of fallen through, so I'm not so sure. I've heard maybe Vega, RuPaul, and Tree could be on the squad. Considering they still haven't announced the teams they're on, maybe that's a good bet, but as of right now, there's still a lot up in the air over there. As for the confirmed teams, the strongest on paper as of right now is going to be SSG. Shocker, they went from EU to NA. It's good to at least see one team that was loyal to the scene get another opportunity. They are a North American-based company, so it's cool that they're actually in the region they're supposed to be now, and they're fielding a roster that is very respectable. I like it a lot. Seeker, Sugarfree, Kellen, Bliss, and CJ. Seeker Sugarfree might be the best possible NA DPS line you could have if you only got 2 players to work with. That is nasty. I mean, both of their peaks are insane. Sugarfree is one of the best flex DPS in the world last year, and Seeker made a good run on Nightmare. I think pairing them up together could be very complimentary for both sides, and I'm expecting some great games out of those two. And hey, Kellen the Felon, back at it, being the solo tank yet again. He has a lot of proven experience. He's gotten better as the years have gone on. He played on a mixed roster last year for NRG, and I think that the sky's the limit for this guy so long as he has the right coaching. There's been some inconsistencies with his play in the past, but I'd like to believe in him, especially if he's on a team like this right from day one. Pretty pumped to see what he's capable of with a team that truly believes in him. And he's got Bliss at the very least to back him up. You got a second Korean import on there. Another guy that was rather unappreciated. Just like with Irony, he had some good performances on Yeti, but they decided to kick him off and ended up being a big mistake. I'm glad he's found a new home now, and I think him and CJ could work pretty well. CJ, I think, while he isn't top tier, is somebody that is pretty respectable, that has made good strides in his game, and is probably one of the better flex support options left over at this point in North America. I don't know, man. I like this team a ton, from a North American standard at least. Outside of that, from like a regional perspective, or international perspective, I should say, I don't know what the expectation would be, but from NA at least, they seem like they could be the overwhelming favorites because they do have a pretty solid foundation from top to bottom. But there certainly are some other NA teams that I'm looking forward to watching again to seeing if they can make progress, one of which is Timeless, who we know of as TSM, and again, they were Timeless before then, Wisp, whatever you want to call them. They're running it back with a lot of the same team members they once had. Chopper, Rocket, Riker, they're all sharing the stage once again. It was really sad what happened after their great start last year. I'm glad they're running it back, and they played super well in the qualifier up until this point. And, you know, I don't mind Luke Mino and Squid as well. They aren't the best, but they certainly aren't the worst either. It's just a fun team that has the potential to maybe get up to second place in this region, but outside of that, not that much of an expectation. You'll also notice that Avidity is running it back. My boy Wub is getting some more play time, which is absolutely sick. And then there's also Rad Esports, who look pretty familiar. They've got a good mix of some players that found success on various teams in North America. Zeb, he found some success on Citrus. You know, King played pretty well last year. Chronic was actually very underappreciated. ZSS and Lep, they're okay. I think Rad Esports have a pretty decent squad here, but it may not have anything on Nightmare. This may be the real number 2 of the region, at least on paper. Kuffa and Clear on the tank line with Vision, Zera, Lethal, Ultraviolet, and Admiral. First and foremost, I'm glad to see that Nightmare is running it back, and I'm glad they brought back Clear as well. I think there's some good pieces on this squad. Lethal made a really good run on Citrus last year before being transferred over to Nightmare and not getting as much playtime. I look forward to him playing more, hopefully. You know, Vision has always shown potential as a North American prospect. Zera put up some great minutes for Nightmare in the past, so it's good to see him running it back too. There's a lot to like about this team. I've always liked Clear as a tank player. Glad he's in North America still. Kuffa, he's played really well, and I think elevating him to a better team would be fantastic. I'm pretty sure he won Face-It League last year, so pretty pumped about that. And Ultraviolet Admiral, probably one of the better Western support lines that you could probably draw up with what was left for them. Nightmare have a squad here, man, and if they piece it all together and they can stop struggling so much like we've seen a little bit so far, get those growing pains out of the way, they could be pretty deadly in North America. And that is a breakdown of some of the teams that have qualified, not all of them, throughout all these regions, and some of the rosters they're working with. We kind of can see generally who are the favorites. We know Korea's probably going to steamroll everybody, but it should be a fun time nonetheless, and I'll be breaking down these regions more in depth very, very soon. But for now, we're going to move over to some more general news about the scene that's important to cover. And the first thing I wanted to discuss and express my pleasure for is the fact that China is back in Overwatch esports. After a long drought, they get to participate again, and OWCS is giving them their own dedicated region, which is sick because China have some very amazing players, as we know. It just felt wrong without them. And to be honest with you, that's all we really know at this moment in time. I don't know what the format looks like. I'm not sure who's going to be playing outside of the Hangzhou Spark / Once Again core and a couple of other players. I heard rumblings that maybe Merit and someone will settle for a Chinese team because they haven't found teams yet, but that's nothing more than a rumor. That's really it, essentially. Only other thing is that we know for a fact that they get 2 spots in the first main event, the first big tournament slash playoff being held in China, in fact. Now, it's a little disappointing that not everybody gets to have some guaranteed teams like China and Pacific, but from what we know, at least for the Stage 1 tournament, NA, EU, Asia, well, most likely Korea, and China are all getting 2 spots each to make up for an 8-team tournament, so we'll see how that goes and if China can hold their weight. I'm looking forward to watching those guys get some standard practice again. You can tell they were a bit rusty, once again, didn't do quite as good as they would have liked to, but still showed the flashes. I think getting more of that consistent practice in scrims against legit teams is going to do them some good, especially if we're going to see guys like Gushue and Leave and Shybak out there. It should be legendary. Speaking of LAN events, we do know there are 3 confirmed live in-person events that we'll witness. Stage 1, like I just said, that'll be held in China. Then, for the midway point, in conjunction with Esports World Cup, we'll see our guys go over to Saudi Arabia for said World Cup, rather than having it be its own separate event. It'll just be a part of OWCS for this year. And then finally, in the finals, just like last year, we're going over to DreamHack Sweden. Honestly, a pretty good mix of venues here. I'm a little disappointed personally that there isn't some kind of event in Japan. In my honest opinion, their fan base has been carrying the esports scene recently. They've shown some insane support. They're giving it life. They deserve to have some kind of event, especially with Crazy Raccoon being so relevant, but oh well, maybe next year. I know there's going to be some people that are butthurt. There's no NA live event, but I mean, come on. We get one like every single year. We get absolutely spoiled. It's not going to kill us if we don't get one like one time. Not a huge deal to me, especially because I probably wasn't going anyway. The other big news that I'm pretty freaking fracking excited for is that hero bans are being fully implemented into OWCS. It's no longer just a concept that is being worked on in the Esports World Cup. We're getting it all year round, and for those of you who watched Esports World Cup, you know that it was pretty successful. I personally really enjoyed it. I liked the extra layer of strategy that was involved with it, banning certain heroes on specific maps and blocking certain guys from being able to dominate on their heroes, and in other instances, picking a certain hero so another team wouldn't pick a hero on the same role. I like the strategy that's involved there. It helps freshen up the meta from time to time as well, so pretty good change. It's a W to me. I'm excited to see it be implemented full time. Other than that, though, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mentioned before the whole relegation system where the bottom teams could be swapped out for with Face It League winners in Stage 2 and beyond. And we also know the start dates as well. I mean, Korea, they get going on January 24th, whilst with NA and EU, January 31st. It's a long season ahead of us, literally from the end of January until November. That's a lot of action with very few breaks in between, and if executed properly, this could be the best variant of Overwatch esports that we've seen in quite some time. So I'm really hoping that things go smoothly and there aren't too many problems, but I suppose we'll see soon enough. And that's all I have for you in this OWCS off-season news recap. I don't know if there'll be another one or not, just because the season is about to begin, but I figured I'd give you guys one. I was motivated to make it, so why not cash in on that? Let me know what you think of all of this info down in the comments below, and if you are excited for the next season of OWCS, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more Overwatch esports content just like this. Peace.